Hi, I'm Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer. I am in my Winterport yard, one of my Winterport yards at the moment, and I've come across a refreshing change, a very refreshing change. As you saw from my last video, if you saw that, I am now getting colonies ready for winter. In particular, I'm making sure that I'm getting the honey supers off single brood chamber colonies so that I can start to feed them. Because when you take the honey supers off the single brood chamber colony, it's very often the case that there's very little honey left in the brood chamber, and it's important to start feeding them then. First of all, to stop them starving right then, but also so you've got time to get them ready for the winter. The double brood chamber colonies at this time of year, you can usually leave the honey supers on quite a bit longer because they've already been filling that second brood chamber with honey, and they're probably, at this time of year, I'd like to see them at 2-3 frames of brood. Now we're approaching the middle of September. Today is Sunday, September 11th, and I would like to see them filling up that brood chamber, and I'd like there to be a honey flow so that they're not entirely reliant on the food that I have to bring for them. First of all, it gets very expensive, and secondly, it's a really tedious job going around feeding hundreds of hives with sugar syrup. Now, the big change that I've seen in this yard relative to my Bangor yard and my Good Shepherd Food Bank yard, both of which I've completed now, they were colonies mostly with single brood chamber hives. This yard also has mostly single brood chamber hives, but the big difference is there's been a honey flow here. There's a bit of a flow of nectar. Now, these yards are only 10 miles apart, but I had a quick peek into some of these hives, and right now there's a honey flow on. And so I'm in two minds as to when to take my supers off. So it's a bit of a game of watch and see and adjust according to what you're finding. I've just finished my Formic Pro treatments on these hives. Actually, I just mentioned the Formic Pro treatments. The Formic Pro treatments, see the grass, how it's been burnt in front of the hives there. That's a interesting side effect of the Formic Pro treatment, at any rate, burning the grass in front of the hives. But what I've got is a situation that I want to balance the possibility of getting honey from my bees with the knowledge that I have to have these hives full of honey by this time next month. I need to make sure that the brood chamber is full, pretty much 90% full, and maybe 10% of it brood area by the beginning of October, with all the rest full of honey. So in that way, because we've got to get it done before the nights get so cold that the bees struggle to cure the food. Even though we're putting in concentrated sugar syrup, I want to make sure that those bees can cure it and evaporate more of the moisture so that it's good stored material. Sugar syrup is an excellent feed for the bees because it's only sucrose. It means there's no undigestible material, which means that the bees don't need to get out to go to the bathroom, basically, during the middle of the winter. And here in Maine, we can have long spells, 2 or 3 months, maybe more, where the bees cannot fly. And if you've got a brood chamber full of dark honey at that time of year, your bees could be in real trouble, because dark honey contains a lot of undigestible material which fills up the bees' guts, and then they have to get out to clear their guts in the wintertime. So if you've got months where they cannot fly, you've got a problem. So I have no hesitation in taking most of the honey from the bees in the late summer and early fall, and then feeding them heavily with sugar syrup, so that what they're overwintering with is predominantly sugar syrup. Now this is mixed with the honey, if any, that they're bringing in. Now the 2 yards that I've just cleared my honey supers off, Bangor and the Good Shepherd Food Bank yards, they're not going to have any honey, or has a significant amount of honey to mix with that sugar syrup, so they're going to be reliant 90% on that sugar syrup. Whereas this yard appears that it's filling up with natural honey right now. It's only about 9:30 in the morning and these bees are busy. So I want to have a quick look and show you what I'm finding to see how much longer I can leave my honey supers on to take advantage of a honey flow, whilst not risking the possibility that I leave a brood chamber only partially filled up for wintertime. So let's have a look at this hive here as an example. And we'll have a look at a couple of others. This one's got a single brood chamber, then a queen excluder, and then 2 honey supers there. Let's see where we are with this one. Now most of these honey supers were pretty empty a few weeks ago. We've got a fair number of bees on the top here. New white comb being built on top of the inner cover. And certainly signs of some good activity here. I see new comb being built, nice white comb here. This is a clear sign of a honey flow. Look at the white comb on the edges there. That's a sign of a honey flow going on. Let's have a look at the frame. Hoping that this is not one of the hives where the queen is got above the queen excluder, or that we've got a second queen above the queen excluder. Nice frame of honey developing nicely there. This is about 3/4 filled with honey. Still got to be cured and then capped off. This medium super, see what the weight feels like. That's got about 25 out of a possible 35 pounds of honey here. Very nice. This honey super has got lots of capped honey in it. You can see capped honey down there. Some comb not filled or even being worked on here, but they're working right out over onto this side. So this colony is sort of shifted to one side there. I may take the opportunity to move a frame or two. But it all depends on what the brood chamber is like. If I've got some honey accumulating in the brood chamber as well, I've got some time that I can play with. These 2 frames are brewing, but relatively speaking empty. I'll put them nearer the middle, get them filled up. Look at that, nice capped honey. Another frame entirely filled with capped honey. And notice how yellow that the cappings are? That's because we've got a goldenrod blooming right now. Now this nectar may not be just coming from goldenrod, but certainly there's a lot of goldenrod pollen coming in, hence the color in the hives. More lovely honey, yellow capping, yellow covering with everything. Let's get that other comb. So, into the brood chamber. This is what will dictate what we're going to do. There's a good 30 plus pounds of honey there. There's not much room, no time to grow in there. Smoke it right up into it. Okay, so get the mite treatments off. Spent mite treatments, that is. Left of the previous mite treatment as well. Okay, so let's have a quick look here. I can see honey on the second frame in. Let's open a bit up. Different angles here. Look on my room here. Work to the side of the hive and behind it or in front. Okay, so this brood chamber, how much honey have we got in here? First of all, the weight. That feels like it's about a third full of honey. And that is more than I was finding in my other yards. The other yards where there's no honey flow, brood from on 8 of the 10 frames. And I mean full of brood, very little food at all. Okay, this frame, entirely full of honey. Not all capped, but it's entirely full of honey, every cell. This frame, certainly full of honey on the outside and filling with honey on the inside with no brood on the inside there. Frame not very well drawn out. That's not one of my better frames, but it's mostly full of honey. And I'm going to put this on the outside, as that would be the better place for a not finished comb. Fair amount of honey here still on the top, but lots of brood, and they're backfilling all these cells. That's good. So we've got honey on the frames up here, capped brood, but they're backfilling in between the cells. As the brood is emerging, they're backfilling with honey. That's very promising. They're filling up the brood chamber without having to be fed. It's about a third full of honey, this frame. And that was the 4th frame in. 5th frame, almost entirely brood. Bit of honey in the middle, and again, a bit of backfilling going on. Looking good. frame. Again, predominantly brood, backfilling. There's some young brood in this frame, which is good. I still want the queen rearing nice healthy young brood, and that young brood is swimming in royal jelly. That's exactly what we want to see. That's 2 frames full of brood. And this frame is mostly full of brood on both sides. Young and older brood. A bit of honey surrounding it. Lots of pollen. Looking good. That's 3 frames full of brood. Now we're to the far side. Lots of pollen, some brood, some honey, more brood here. Okay, so I would say we've got the equivalent of 4 frames of brood. Here. Lots of brood on this side. Still lots of brood here, about 5 frames of brood. So this frame, brood, pollen, honey and brood. So we've got about 5 frames of brood. Maybe if I take all of the frames all together, we may have about 6 frames of brood. I'm going to put this frame of honey on the far side here. So this brood chamber is about half full of honey, half full of brood. Maybe just about half full of honey. For a single brood chamber hive, that's a lot of food. As the time goes by, you can see they're backfilling. So my inclination is that this hive could stay as a single brood chamber hive for about another week before I take the honey off them. That'll give them time to pretty much fill up that other brood chamber. So I am delighted with that. Because I have so few of my yards have a honeyflow, I want to take advantage of what honeyflows I can get. Because this year I'm way down on honey. So we're going to leave this one on. In fact, I wish I brought a couple of spare honey supers with me. What I'll do is I've got another super, deep super over here. I'll stick it on top. Who knows? Maybe they'll fill this too. Let's look inside another hive. Look at these, where there is a double brood chamber. See how well they're doing. These double brood chamber hives, they will have been putting a lot of effort into filling up the brood chamber, but just to show you the difference, let's have a look. Don't know how much honey they may have stored up here, but it'll show you the difference between a double brood chamber hive and a single brood chamber hive. This colony is filling up its upper brood chamber with honey nicely. I can see lots of white comb in there. Some unworked on combs there, so I may mix some comb around. working on one side. These frames are empty. We'll sort of checkerboard the relatively empty frames with the relatively full ones. Make it more likely that they fill them up. Look at that beautiful white honey that they're making. That brood chamber, from the top anyway, looks full of honey. Capped honey here, 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 here. Open cells there, open cells here. Let's see how deep the honey goes into the brood chamber. Now for the winter time, I want this super pretty much full of honey. Now, honey there, but the brood out here, backfilling most of these cells with honey, but there's still young brood in it. These two are entirely full of honey. Remember, the brood chamber was concentrated on this side. That's one frame half full. And go in a little deeper onto the... I suspect they're filling it up from this side here. And this frame is pretty much almost entirely filled. As their brood is emerging, they're backfilling this area with honey. A little less so on this side. They've backfilled all of this. See how beautifully they've backfilled these cells here. I'm going to try and get it to reflect a little bit. This area, still the queen has been back in, putting a bit more brood back in this part. And from what I can see, these frames are filling up, pretty much filled with honey. Entirely full of honey, as is the next frame, presumably the one after. So we're I've got about 2 frames of brood up here, maybe 3, well on course for them to be able to fill this up all by themselves without any additional help. So I have no hesitation leaving the queen excluder on here and leaving the honey supers on this colony maybe for another 2 weeks. This is full of honey. I can see a reasonable amount of honey down below as well. I'm not going to open up those frames. We'll have brood and honey down there. Usually if the top brood chamber is full of honey, the bottom one is usually about half full by the time the season finishes. So, lots of honey in the brood chamber, still rearing plenty of bees, which is good. Honey super that's pretty full, so may as well get it filled entirely. I am delighted with that. Full honey flow in a yard for change. Wish my other yards were the same. Let's have a look at that one. Coming in. Plenty of pollen coming in, but lots of nectar coming in too. This honey super is relatively empty. We've got very few bees up here, very little going on here. They're doing some on there. Just the differences in the population, I suspect. You can tell the difference is just the entrances are quite different between the 2 colonies. Now, we have less going on this side, more going on that side. This does not look as full in the brood chamber. So what I might do with this hive is just take the honey super off this one and put it on that one. They're still filling it up with honey. This is 80% full of honey, not much of it capped, but they're filling this up. But this one's got relatively far to go by comparison to the hive next to it. Have a look in the middle. I don't recommend you going straight into the middle of a comb, taking a middle comb out of a super without making more space. So be careful. You can do it without doing damage to your queen. So they are backfilling here. There's lots of brood emerging, and they're backfilling those cells as they go. But I am going to make sure this hive fills itself up very nicely, and I'm just going to leave this as is. I'm going to close up the top on this one, let them fill by themselves, get that mite treatment off. Now if this had been single brood chamber hive, all of this would have been coming off and I'd start feeding this one right away. But it's not. So I'm leaving this honey for the bees. This one is nearly full. Honey super on here because there's next to nothing here. During a good full honey flow, they can fill up a super in a week. Now I've no idea whether this full honey flow will continue. It's only just got started. But if it does continue, then we may as well take advantage of it. So when the flows are like this, it pays to get around your yards relatively frequently because things can change just like that. And we're getting a honey flow here, which I'm lucky to be in a position to take advantage of. So I am going to, I'm pretty 99% sure I've got some smaller colonies here. Now I'm going to start feeding these anyway. I doubt very much I'll be doing anything like putting a honey super on these. Because I was only around here a few weeks ago just balancing them up, adding brood into these hives. They're looking good. They've filled up all the frames. In terms of with bees, that is. See little white flecks of wax that they're producing here. The weight is still moderate. I'd like to get a feeder on here just to be sure, because I'm not looking to take any more off this hive. So we're going to put a feeder on that one. So these hives were getting fed before the mite treatments went on. I had to stop feeding them during the mite treatment. Now the mite treatment's over, I can start feeding them again. But these single brood chamber hives, these look great. I mean, bees go to wall. I wouldn't say they're one of Ian Stepler's boxer bees, but I'm saying that they're looking healthy in terms of the number of bees. But they're still a bit light. So we're going to get a feeder on them. But the difference between the single brood chamber hive there and these single brood chamber hives, the difference is the month that one had as a head start, whereas these were started very late. And their main purpose is just to have another colony that I can grow next year. So that is great news. I'm going to go around a few more of these yards, a few more of these hives, and check to see if I need to come back here with honey supers. But what I'm going to be doing is feeding the ones that need feeding, and then and putting honey supers on one or two perhaps that have room for more honey. That was a very unexpected surprise today. I'm delighted. I'm Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer. See you next time.